This is, of course, discipleship leadership training, session number 6. And I got to really honestly confess, I've had problems preaching and writing sermons about certain subjects, but this may be the total failure for me. Just not to get a laugh, I'm really being serious. I'm a terrible listener. And so the things that I'm going to tell you about tonight are because I have failed miserably at this. And in spite of that, God still has chosen to use me. We have a lot of jokes around our house about me and hearing and listening, okay? And so I don't take any of them offensively, because I know there's a hint of truth in almost everything they say. So my father said to me when I was a young boy, he says, your life will never be a waste, because it can always be used as a bad example. And so this is me being a bad example, and I'm telling you, don't be like this, okay? Be a better listener. Be a good listener. That is so good. This is just perfect. Thank you. Yeah. I thought for a second there was a Catholic again. I was back in the confessional. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 39 years since I went to a confessional. This verse is called the Shema. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God." This is a very critical, this is almost the beginning of the verses of Moses' writing to the children of Israel. The very first thing he tells the children of Israel is to listen. To listen to God. I think as leaders, though, we need to take and realize that it's more than just nodding our head when someone's talking, but it's actually, and we're going to go over this in the second half, it's about active listening. The word sonority is an interesting word. It's the ability or quality of being resonant, to hear. You see the word sonar in there? And so it's the ability to receive and understand hearing. In Spanish, it would be sonoridad. ¿Sí? Sonoridad?
Escuchar.
Sí, okay. He's not familiar. I'm trying to impress my pastor. Miserable fail there. And so, sonority is time and meaning. Now think about the meaning of the word sonority. And think, why would sonority be time and meaning? And anyone can say anything they want to think about it. What does that
Because
bring
you
to
gotta,
mind?
you gotta hear.
Okay.
I mean, you gotta hear, you gotta comprehend.
Right? That would be the meaning part.
And then you have to put the time in order to learn that craft, whatever it is.
Okay, and that's a really excellent point. I like what you said there, the craft. You know, listening is such an important skill, yet we don't teach it to our children, do we?
Well, I tell
What's
them
that?
every day.
Along with nothing else that they teach in our public schools, they also don't teach listening.
Wooden spoons help.
Amen.
Old smoking.
Well, I think John
But
just
if
shivered
you
when
think
he
about it, it's the one skill, and here was another fact that I learned. 60% of communication is listening, but we only comprehend about 25% of that. So if you do those numbers real quick, we're only getting about 15% of what goes on in a conversation. Some of us just make up our own conversations.
While we're listening.
While we're listening. So if sonority is meaning,
we literally need to stop what we're doing for listening to happen. Like I said, I'm not a big listener, but one of the things I've learned is, especially if you're dealing with young men, is that when you're working with them shoulder to shoulder, and their minds are engaged in often other things because and let's face it, construction is really just factory work outside. A lot of times it's repetitive what we're doing. You know, we got to run 1,000 nails into these boards. Let's start running these nails in. And while they're doing that, because of the repetitive nature of it sometimes, people start to get comfortable and then they start talking. And that is often an opportunity to hear what people goes on in their hearts. Is it a situation in working? Another place is when you're sitting down and having dinner with someone. You know, those are the places where life intersects, and we have the opportunity for sonority to happen. And so, what would be the biggest hindrance then to listening? All right, that's good. Do we have a pen I can actually, let's write some of these down. Would you write, since not only do I not listen, I don't write.
He's not a great speller.
I'm not a great speller. But remember what Abraham Lincoln said about spelling. He says it's a dull man who can spell one word only one way.
I think one reason is we don't care what the other.
Yeah, that would probably be neat. Go ahead and put that one up. I'm telling you what, I'm trying to be really honest with you. That I sometimes don't care about people, so I don't want to listen to them.
Time, not taking
Time.
Could you write a little bigger? We can't see.
Yeah, that is really small. Do you think everyone has the Hubble telescope or something?
This is really great.
Great job, Bobby.
Phil, sometimes it's related to what we talked last week, which is not wanting to learn.
Okay.
Maybe we just don't want to learn, because when you listen, you learn.
Yes.
And so maybe lack of desire to
An
learn.
unteachable spirit?
Maybe, yeah, maybe lack of desire to learn. Maybe unteachability would be the word.
Or we think we already know.
Oh, yeah, that's another one.
So
Or you
would that be
could put it
pride?
back to pride.
Yeah, all right, pride. That's a
Get
good
out of
one.
my head.
Busyness. You're thinking about your next thing.
She did pride.
Ooh, you guys are killing me here. Yeah, busyness.
Looks like you're not alone, Phil.
Yeah.
You know, there's also a spirit
Not business.
of fear.
Busy, why?
A spirit of fear.
Bobby.
It's not business.
Like
I
if
thought it was
somebody
business.
introduces you with a concept that you had not engaged in before, and so it was new. Well, a lot of people are
Afraid of new ideas.
Afraid of new ideas.
Yeah.
And so that fear, what that fear does to them in that moment is they disengage from the concept you're trying to present to them. And usually when it's most direct is when it's pointed directly at a situation that's been revealed to them. So, you know, the Bible says that actions taken in fear result in torment. And so by turning your back on the new concept that's going to replace the concept you have in your own spirit, because the one you have is incorrect, and the one you're learning is correct, that shuts you right down.
So you would say fear?
Yeah.
Fear and stuff.
So what would be an example, Chuck, of that? Give us an example.
An example of that is, we had this conversation last night at my house, and we were trying to understand why Seventh-day Adventists, what's one of the things about them that they got wrong. And I explained from my perspective, and my understanding was that they are very legalistic, no pork, church on Saturday. You know, everything has to be just so. And the particular gentleman we were talking to, I pointed out to him that those people were obeying the rules because of the rules. And you don't obey the rules because of the rules. You obey the rules because the person that gave you the rules as a guideline, you love them. And it's out of your,
Or fear,
well, or both. Old Smoky,
Respect it.
Old Smoky stopped a bunch of people from climbing up and down the stairs at my house.
oh, those stairs.
They were dead.
They're awesome.
They were dead. And so, in this understanding about you seek pleasure in pleasing God out of responding to Him in love, I watched disengagement. I watched the person flat out just
Yeah, shut down.
shut down. I watched them shut
If you
down.
challenge people's beliefs, a lot of times they shut right down too.
There you go.
They don't want to listen.
Right.
Because you challenge, especially if you challenge them with the truth of God's word. And let's face it, folks, if you're going to be in a position of leadership, our number one job really is to challenge people's paradigms. And to challenge the mentality of the 7 words to kill the church, right? This is the way we've always done it? Yes.
I noticed it. Part of what Chuck was saying was, we obey because we respect, you said that, respect. So then, we would listen or we would not listen if we don't respect someone. So there are people, for example, in a congregation, if somebody disrespects the person who's speaking, they will go ahead and talk while that person's talking. It's disrespect. And I think that is, you can tell where
Right
people's
there.
heart lies
Disrespect.
by the way that they behave when a certain person or anybody is talking.
Sure.
You can see if they care for that person.
I would also add to this another one, distraction. Because for me personally, if there's a lot, like, if there's a lot going on around me, if my kids are going crazy and Joy's trying to talk to me, I can't focus. I can't have that conversation because I'm so distracted by everything that's going on around me that I can only do one thing. I can't,
Most guys are that way. Monothinkers. Yeah.
What about language?
Language is good, good. We're going to be talking a little bit about that later on, Bill. Hold on to that thought.
And another thing is not everybody is an audio learner. The visual learners, kinesthetic learners, and audio learners. So that's 1/3 of the population would excel at listening naturally because they actually get
Right.
it.
And like we used to say, naturally. And so,
I have to write
so can we
down.
say that listening is an unnatural product?
For 66%
For
of the
some,
population.
for
Yeah,
some it is.
yeah, it is. It's not natural, and it has to be developed. That's why I said, we aren't training our children to listen. Because it does take time. It takes meaningful content to fill up the voids. And also, it's necessary to be comfortable in silence. We're going to do a little exercise on that a little later on, too. Hopefully I haven't killed this again. All right, so hearing. Hearing can be broken down. Now we're talking about the physical aspect of hearing, the ability for auditory wave to enter into your ear and bring your anvil and your hammer and to get all those little bones into the skull and to actually be interpreted as something. And with hearing, there can be oftentimes misunderstanding or miscommunication. And the other one is just, Matt, is this going to come up if I hit it? So I want you to watch this little video about misunderstanding. Hit it one more time. Una más. Por favor. Maybe.
The Chevy Cruze Eco gets up to 42 miles per gallon.
What? Sam, get your ears cleaned out.
What did you say?
42 wild Italians. Plus-size individuals. That's all.
I'm pretty sure he said the Chevy Cruze Eco.
Commercial for Eco? Eco? No, Eco.
Yes, the Chevy Cruze Eco gets up to 42 miles per gallon.
Who asked you?
Amazingly fuel.
Not the volume.
This was merely a segment that was taken out of our home one evening. And what's the biggest complaint that I usually get from people about their spouse or someone else is, what? We'll just all say it together. You don't listen to me, right? And this guy was very concerned about his wife. He says, I'm just, Doc, I'm really concerned about her because I don't think my wife's listening to me. I think she may actually have some hearing issues. And so the doc said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, here's a simple way to do it. When you're in a room with your wife and she has her back to you, from 20 or 30 feet away, simply ask her a question in your normal voice. And then move closer and see at what point she hears your question. So he walks in at night and she's standing at the sink in the kitchen. He's standing at the door and he goes, honey, what are we having for dinner? No response. So he walks a little closer to her. And he's about 15 feet away. He says, honey, what are we having for dinner? Still no response. So he gets a little closer, about 10 feet away from her. And he goes, honey, what are we having for dinner? Nothing. So he walks up right behind her and he says, honey, what are we having for dinner tonight? She goes, chicken! For the last 4 times I told you, chicken! So, it's our perception that also may need to be checked out when we're talking about listening and hearing, okay?
Again, that scenario was also taken from our house.
And so, there can be physical issues with your hearing. A good friend of mine just recently broke down and got some hearing aids, and he says, you can hardly see him. He says, I just let my hair grow a little bit to cover him up. He says, I know what you're going to do, Phil. And so, there could be a physical problem with your hearing, and you may need to get it taken care of. Take care of it. But
Would you take your own advice?
hey, I went to an audiologist, and he
That was
said
15 years
it wasn't 15 years ago. This is what Floyd said. He said,
You're not listening.
It was 15 years ago.
he said your hearing is fine. He says, but we do marriage counseling on Tuesdays and the other part, aside from being physical,
Do we have to pay for this?
just don't forget to take your wages.
We gotta pay $50 for this.
What kind of towards your time?
Absolutely. The other part is paying attention. Now this is, I'm telling you what, total breakdown. I don't pay attention. There's usually, I'm listening to so many other voices in my head already. You know, trying to clear out that noise. And so a lot of times I'll be working on something or doing something, and I don't hear my wife tell me 3 times that it's chicken. You know what I'm saying? And so,
Okay, I got the best story.
okay. I'm gonna turn it over to her.
Did you guys purposely get this one?
Never, never, never. So we're in the car, we're traveling somewhere together, and I'm having this conversation on what happened and everything, and I said, did you hear what I said? He goes, are you talking to me? You're the only person in the car.
Bluetooth.
No, I mean, he does not.
Oh, that's
rushing. I have my 3 kids with me. I'm
I
trying
have
to
3
get,
children, that's why I can't pay
I'm trying to
attention to
get,
anything else.
things going,
Yeah.
and things happening and stuff, and I'm trying to find more of my kids if I lost them for the first time. And then I was like, I
Yeah,
didn't even
I get it.
hear you. I'm so
You could
sorry.
be Phil's daughter.
Yeah, and I felt so bad because I'm like, oh my goodness, how long did she think that there was something that was not right with us? And so now every time I see her, I'm like, good morning. But that's the thing is, I'm not listening and I'm not paying attention. And I
Right.
thought to myself, how many more people have I been doing this to?
I forgive you.
So now I can say, if you say good morning, I'm so sorry. I probably need to get my hearing checked.
Well, there are certain things that we do pay attention to. You know, they all say, you can't hear anything. But if I hear Steele or Remington cry at night, in the middle of the night, I'm up, I hear it. I know exactly, you know.
Joy's still asleep.
I'm out. I mean, I'm off across the entire house.
Bill's gonna come right up. That's right.
Did you hear the ladder fall last night?
Yes.
Did you hear that? It blew open.
I was in that call.
Yeah. And so here are a few things that we have as filters in our brains. And Bill, you talked about language, and that's one of them. Our culture. As Americans, you know, we probably filter out a lot of what we're doing here. It sometimes can be white noise. But if I were to take you and put you in Rwanda for about 6 to 8 weeks, and you're sitting there, and you heard someone speak English, even if it was from New York City, you'd be excited because you suddenly heard something that is familiar to you. And so our culture and our language are filters that we tune into immediately. And you know, you get really excited when you hear someone from your own country using that language when you're in another country, and suddenly you want to find out where they're from and who, you know, how they're there, and so you build interest in those things. If you have shared values, this is huge. Yes, go ahead.
Today I was sitting behind the desk and I heard the table praying behind me. And so after they were done, I went over and I, asked them about themselves. I said, you obviously are believers, and yes, they were. And it was an immediate connection to just, talk about, what they're doing, where they go to church, how, their children and so forth. So I would say that's part of it.
Absolutely. The next one is beliefs. And this is the funny, it works in the opposite way too. People, we went to Jamaica, Puerto Rico, been in Brazil. People that you have no communication ability with. You cannot talk to them. But because of believers in Christ, you suddenly have the ability to have a desire to pick up what they are saying, and you zone in. You pay more attention to that. People's attitudes. How many of you have teenage girls now? Not saying anything, just saying, if you had theoretically teenage girls at home,
Or 5-year-old girls.
or 5-year-old girls who think they're teenagers, sometimes you can get a lot of attitude. I have people that I work with, and you try to explain things to them and tell them what's going on, and a lot of times you just get an attitude, and so it's like, okay, conversations are short. People's expectations. Now this happens a lot between married people, I think. A lot of times you're communicating, and the wife has one expectation about something, the husband has a completely different expectation about it. And when they communicate, he's doing it the way he thought he heard it, when she's not happy because of how he did it, or maybe something she expected completely different. And so expectations. Finally, the last one is intentions.
we probably wouldn't sit down and have a lot of deep, meaningful conversations with Islamic terrorists who want to blow people up. We watched a documentary about the Mountbattens. And the Mountbattens were the family that Queen Elizabeth and specifically Prince Philip, who was a Greek royalty, the Mountbatten family. Louis Mountbatten was a great guy. He was a great admiral in World War II. And he was a hero, just a really super guy. He got blown up by the IRA. And I'm telling you what, I remember when it happened in 1979. And I have since that day have not respected the Irish for it. And so, sitting down with an IRA terrorist, because of the intentions of people, intentions for evil, you probably aren't going to listen to what they have to say. And so all of these things culminate in our ability to pay attention to people and to focus on what they're saying and to focus on what they're not saying.
So would you say that trust would be part of intention?
I think it is. I think that's a very, very good point. Trust is a huge part of leadership. And in that role, you're going to be expected, I'm being specific, germane to us as a group, your leadership is trusting you to take people's lives literally in your hands. And we're trusting you with that. And by the same token, when you are opening up to people in your circle, you are trusting them. And so it's a matter of vulnerability when we open up to people. And it's also reciprocal when you start to listen to people. It's almost like that confessional type of mentality, are you going to be trustworthy with what people say to you? And we'll talk a little bit about things that need to be avoided in that area as well, yes.
Before you switch the slide, can I ask you about the filter? So what we're saying is these 7 points are the tools by which we listen better.
Yeah, these are the things that affect how we pay attention to people.
Or if?
Or
Okay.
not pay attention.
So could they also be bridges?
Oh, absolutely.
Like if I appreciate other people's culture, even though I might not have the same culture and I might not have the same filter, but if I appreciate other people's cultures, then that would be a bridge. Same thing with language. I don't know Russian,
Right.
but I am interested in learning some Russian, for example. So then this would also fit as bridges to be better listeners, right?
Absolutely. And it's not one way. A bridge is never one way, right? We can go both directions on a bridge. So in the same way that this could be a hindrance to our paying attention to people, this can also be a benefit because, I'm interested in learning Spanish. So I walk into every 7-Eleven and slaughter the Spanish language right there on the spot. And I know that they're going to correct me and they're going to smile a little bit and they're going to have some humor and they're going to correct me. And the lady at the McDonald's window, I'm always speaking Spanish to her. And, she's a Jehovah's Witness, by the way, so I'm doing double duty there. That's right. Eating my chicken biscuit and witnessing for Jesus. But you're right, it's an interest. And so their culture, their language, their values, what they believe in, these can also become things that I'm interested in, so I want to pay attention to you. Why do we do it? We do it for the sake of Christ, don't we? Didn't Paul say, I'm all things to all men, that I might win some for Christ's sake? And so these could be impediments to communication, but these could also be the very things that draw us in to conversation with people. So it's an excellent point there. Chuck.
Part of the equation in the Hebrew understanding of the word Shema is you hear, then you listen to the information. But these 7 things are wrapped up in responding.
Correct.
And so you gotta respond. It's kind of like calling the fire department. Your house is on fire. Well, they hear the phone, so they answer the phone. Well, they heard you. Now you're giving them your address, and so they wrote it down, okay, and they listen. But if that's as far as they go, your house.
Your toast.
Toast, right?
Literally.
Get out the chicken. Cooking chicken. And so the culmination of hearing the word Shema, listening, is responding. And so you have to respond. And that goes both ways. The person that's being mentored needs to open up their mind and maybe their heart and be willing to have what they thought was true changed. And we constantly, weekly pray for that in our Awana Club as the lessons being given. Because everybody's got presuppositions. But also, the person that's doing the teaching it goes both ways, is my point. And someone can say something to me about a concept that takes the path I was going, and like, oh my gosh, that's completely wrong. Right.
Yeah.
And so the responding and actually in the scenario, it goes both the bridge you were talking about and all this, it all ends up in what you do, how you respond. That's the total Hebrew Shema. You come to one, Wednesday night. You'll get the Shema lesson.
We like that. What?
I was thinking about my experience when I was a missionary in Guatemala. And I think that the thing that I've heard the most from other people is, well, most Americans don't. Most Americans don't. And I think that maybe body language is the issue, but a perception of interest. If other cultures don't perceive that you are interested in them, there is a huge barrier. Or if they feel that you feel you're either deprecating or you think you're superior.
The ugly American, I think, is what they
Well, I don't
used
think
to
it's
say.
just other
Yeah.
cultures.
But I do think some of it's body language.
Yeah. Good points, good points. All right, bottom line is we need to care about people. Because if you really care about people, you're willing to listen to them. And there was a saying years ago, I'm not sure where it came from, the whole idea that you can learn from anybody. Even in Proverbs it talks about that when David was running away because of Absalom, and Absalom had usurped his authority and taken over the kingdom, and he's running away. And this guy Shimei, who was a relative of Saul's, comes out and starts cursing him and throwing stones at him and throwing dust on him. And Joab says, "Hey, let me take this dead dog's head off." And he says, no. He says, let him speak. He says, because we can all, basically David was saying, hey, look, it doesn't matter who it is, let's glean what we can from what he's saying, and he's a messenger from God. And so if we looked at people and what they say, even if it's 90% wrong, let's glean the 10%, and let's apply that in our lives. And so, caring about people, even people who seem insignificant, even the Shimei's in our life who just throw dirt on us and throw rocks at us and curse us, let's glean what truth might be in what they're saying and let's apply it to our lives. Go ahead.
Well, I think the whole thing about discipleship is this. If we don't care about people, we won't disciple anybody.
Gary?
Caring about people, if we care about people, then these need to be practiced. These need to be, we're sitting here, we admit that these are all our faults. So if we really care about people, what are we doing about our faults? Where's the application? We need to be understanding that we're gonna care about them. We have a list of things that we as humans do. There's 11 of them, there's probably more. But what are we doing to correct that? You know, the application is we say we care about people, but we're admitting all our faults. Right. We need to make sure that we take these seriously. So when we do care about them, we are someone that is not allowing busyness to come in that moment, not allowing pride to enter in, and not allowing distractions. Because we really do care, we need to apply these. And these are something that I was looking at those and saying, what can I do if I just did one of those a week and prayed about it? Prayed each week about how can I get better at just one of those each week. I'm saying to myself, I admit that. So now admitting my faults, what am I going to do about it? And if I'm going to care about people, my wife, other people, then yeah, those things, not all those are affected me, but those are strong ones. Apply it. And what better to do to apply it is go to God and say, God, I have this problem. This week I want to make an effort. And then next week I want to make an effort. Because if I really do care about someone who I'm listening to or speaking to or not listening to, then why am I not going to take action to make it better?
I think
Instead of
that's
just
the
talking about
intention of the Shema Chuck was talking about.
Respond.
Because it's listening, but it's doing something.
Correct.
Joy?
I just, my dad is here. I just want to brag on my dad for a minute, because my dad is really good at listening, like really, really good at listening. And not just the listening, but he's good at hearing the whole situation, and then I think God gives him wisdom in how to respond to things, and I've always really respected that. But my mom told me that he has been, I just think it's so cool because my dad posts a lot of political things, and we have a cousin who lives in New York who I would say is the most liberal person I have ever met in my entire life. I mean, I haven't blocked him or anything, but he posts things all the time, and I'm like, oh my word, like, I just don't know how he believes these things. My mom tells me the other day that my dad has been communicating with him. And he has been reaching out to my dad and asking him really interesting questions. And I said to my mom, I was like, that is so neat, because what's going on is that my cousin knows that my dad is a Christian. He knows exactly where he stands. And they're able to have an amazing conversation. And I don't know all the conversation that's happened, but they've been able to have some really amazing conversations about things that my cousin is like, well, if you're a Christian and you believe all these things, then how do you justify this? Or how do you do this? And I think that my dad shows that he is respectful of where my cousin stands on things.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't disengage when he asks hard things. My dad has taken time to respond. I mean, all of these things, even through distance, my dad has been able to do in a really clear way. And my cousin actually, I think, is coming down, and you guys are going to see each other and talk, which is really cool. I mean, and he's old. I mean, he's like in his 40s. And he's like very
He's almost done.
I'm amazed that
We'll cut that out.
him being so liberal that he's asking questions that would change his mind. Because for the most part, he's
Stop listening for you.
well, something like that, I don't know. But I just think it's awesome that we're in an age where a lot of times things like that can brew bitterness.
Yeah.
That my dad has had an opportunity to reach out and have some really awesome, respectful conversations. But it goes back to these things that, you know, how to respond to someone when they are, like, I mean, he posts things all the time, and I'm like, I just
Well,
can't
then
even read the
there begs
comments
the
on that,
question.
you know? But
Tears off.
Do we listen because we care, or do we care because we listen? Jared?
Well, what's funny about it is the reality is I don't want to do it.
That's because you care about people?
I don't really want to respond. Because, you know, I actually told, this is my nephew, I told him, I said, you really force me to think a lot deeper than I want to, you know? And so it's funny, I was just thinking about this, you know, there's two people that I know that are very liberal. One of them is my nephew, and another is this guy that I mow his lawn for and sort of keep an eye on his house. But we can converse too, but it's like, the reality is, though, I really don't want to. But I feel like I'm sort of compelled to say something, and I think for me, you know, there's so much political stuff out there. I just don't, when I hear something, it's like, I don't want other people to think that I agree with that. And so I sort of feel compelled to engage, but the reality is I really don't want to. I really don't want to engage. So.
There is a possibility our physical hearing is fine, but we misunderstand or we miscommunicate, as it demonstrated in this video.
Weekend Update recognizes its obligation to present responsible opposing viewpoints to our editorials. Here with an editorial reply is Miss Emily Patella.
What's all this fuss I keep hearing about violins on television? Now, why don't parents want their children to see violins on television? Why, I thought the Leonard Bernstein concerts were just lovely. Now, if they only show violins after 10 o'clock at night, the little babies will all be asleep and they won't learn any music appreciation. But they'll end up wanting to play guitar and bongo drums and go to Africa and join these rock and roll outfits, and they won't drink milk. I say there should be more violins on television and less game shows. It's terrible the way things. What?
That was violence on television, not violins. Violence.
Oh, so that's different.
Yes.
Never mind.
So, what did she hear? Violins on television. What was the subject about? Violence on television. So, it can happen, right? There can be a misunderstanding. So how do we avoid misunderstanding in our communication?
Ask them to repeat.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the ways. There are certain things that we need to avoid when we're communicating, especially as leaders, as you're working with people. There are certain things that need to be avoided. One of them is gossip. You know, if you're, this is what I tell people when they bring stuff up. I say, if you're not a part of the problem and you're not a part of the solution, then you should have no part of it. Period. I bring this up because this is the number one thing that destroys churches. Gossip and hearsay. Judging. You're listening to a person and you have a solution in your mind. Boom! And you drop it out. And my wife has reminded me on several occasions that sometimes she would like me to just listen to her and not come up with a 4-point sermon plan. And so, don't judge too quickly any scenario. Negativity. I don't know, but how many people love to be around negative people? Yeah, no one does. No one likes to be around negative people. And so, you need to help people first of all, in your leadership role, help people get out of negativity, get out of that, but you also need to not demonstrate that when you're speaking to people, because that will kill communication faster than anything else. Complaining. No one likes to hear people complain, okay? Nobody. Complaining is just misery. Just misery. Number 5, excuses. Make sure that you are not a blame thrower. That little buzzword, blame thrower. In the same way, it's destructive, it burns up people's lives, it destroys stuff. And so blaming other people is not a good thing. Exaggeration. And I've been guilty of this, and there's a simpler word that we use in church, it's called lying. So be careful on how you expand your stories. I think it was Mark Twain who said, any good story needs exaggeration. But that may not necessarily be true, especially in our roles as leaders, okay? And the last one is really important too, dogmatism. And dogmatism is really when opinion presides or presents itself as fact. And so we have to be really careful about that. We don't want to become dogmatic in our attitudes or our presentation, because we don't want to miscommunicate. We want to make sure that people understand what we're saying clearly. And don't ever be afraid to say, what do you mean? Jerry?
Sometimes you have to avoid the voice recognition when you're texting.
Oh, yeah.
I sent a text to my Awana leaders one day, and I started out by saying, so, leaders, blah, blah, blah. The interpretation was soul eaters.
I hope the guy that invented talk to text burns in hello.
We have a little saying in our group, and the whole idea of the dogmatism. Joy has this ability
Oh no.
to concoct and present information in such a way
It sounds legit.
that you think that she really knows what she's talking about. So we call it joggle. Instead of Google, it's joggle. And so Joy will present something to us, and we've now learned to say, is this joggle information or is this true? Because sometimes it does sound so good that it can be believed that she's right on point, and come to find out she has the map upside down. So,
Don't get mad at me, but we've been riding this bicycle for 15 miles.
Women have the ability,
Which I just exaggerated.
women have the ability to connect dots. They use both sides of their brain.
Intuitively.
And this can be discernment, it can equate with discernment.
no, it's a lie.
There are some truths in there.
Can you use an example? No, I'm curious.
Oh, boy.
What would be an example?
Well, like if you drive by a mattress store and you're like, wow, they have good mattresses. And she's like, oh yeah, I know that brand. And they do all this stuff. I'm like, oh, she knows so much about it. And then Cal will be like, no, that's Java. I mean, she's just stuff.
You mean like, okay, this is the, for example, that they really caught me on, is they were like, Joy, how old do you think these vine trees are? We were going through this vineyard up in,
New York.
in Toronto, Canada. And I was like, yeah, Joy, when were these planted? How old do you think they are? And I just kind of went off on what I thought. And they all looked at me, they're like, you have no idea what you're talking about. I was like, I know, but it sounded really good. That's probably true. And then I looked it up, and I was mostly right.
No.
pointing at other people now, okay, people?
She
Okay.
is right, she guesses and guesses right. Okay. Education.
Thank you.
Just go with your gut.
Yeah, go with your gut.
We took a sports
I
test
do
one
believe
time.
women are a little more intuitive than men, and they can connect the dots. There've been
I
times-
would say that yes when it comes to people.
Yeah.
I would say absolutely. When it comes to people, most women have better reads on other individuals than men would.
Yeah, and that's a good time for us to listen.
That's not what we're talking about.
All right, yes.
Well, I would say that list, you had the previous list, the whole thing is really knowing, if you're in a discipleship position and you know that person, and they say something that may sound offensive to you, but you really know their heart.
Right on.
It's so, you have to just take it and say, I know that person, they would never mean that way. And that's the key in really in a discipleship, and Jeffrey really taught us that when he came and he wanted the elders to really get to know one another. Because, I mean, we've been ministering with David Casey, with Jeff, and, all of us together, and we really didn't know each other that well. We just did things here and so forth. And so, and Jeffrey wisely knew that there would be times that would come along where people would say things or there would be misunderstandings or something. But when you really get to know someone and you get to know their heart, when those things come, you stop them immediately because you know in your heart who they are and what they stand for and so forth. So I am very grateful to him for doing that, and you have to do that in a discipleship situation. You have to know the person you're discipling so well that you don't get offended, that you don't look for reasons to be offended, that you, all the things that Satan uses to destroy churches, you have to trust your leadership. And when you get this negative idea about someone who is in leadership, shame on you if you do not go and you clear things up with it so that you don't carry that through, because that is how Satan works the best.
Okay. I looked up some things called active listening. Has anyone ever heard of that before? Anyone? Okay, we've got a couple smart people back in the back there. I had never heard of this before.
Yeah, I have heard of it. I got to sit and listen to all of it.
Pretty good.
No, next out.
What did you just say?
What you said? So active listening, it's actually a legit thing. We're going to go into it a little bit, but I wanted to show you a couple of videos about active listening and see if you can identify yourself in these videos.
So, if you've ruled out any medical problem and your child is still wetting the bed, he may be trying to tell you something.
He's telling me I have to pee.
So I think we're going to wrap it up for tonight. But before we do, are there any other questions? Yes, Deborah, yeah.
We have a 6-year-old daughter, and she's a great kid, but she's been having trouble listening, and she's been very stubborn lately.
But that's every kid. It's just a phase, right?
Well, this is a perfect opportunity for you to try some active listening.
Thank you. We'll try that.
Wait a second. I'm not familiar with that.
Well, it's encouraging your child to express herself verbally without influencing her with your own preconceived notions or opinions.
Got it. Here we go.
Why don't we try to illustrate this with a little role playing? Let's have you raise it.
No.
Come to the front of the class.
Why don't you go? Why don't you go, Dad?
Right, don't be shy. Now, Ray, let's just say that I'm your daughter and I refuse to go to visit Grandma on her birthday.
Well, in this case, I happen to know Grandma, and I can't say I blame you.
Just hypothetically, Ray, all right? Now, let's just say, Ray, that you want to get from your daughter what she's really feeling. Go ahead.
Okay, daughter, you have to go to Grandma's house.
I'm not going.
Well, you have to go. It's her birthday.
I hate when you make me do things.
Look, I'm not making you go, okay? It's Grandma's birthday. There aren't going to be many more of them.
See, I'm gonna stop you just for a second, Ray. You see, I don't think at this point we need to discuss Grandma's mortality. Doing, Ray?
I'm playing the game.
It's not a game. It's okay. It's okay. Ray, if I say to you, I hate when you make me do things, perhaps you could acknowledge my feelings by saying something like, you feel you don't have any control over our plans. You understand?
That doesn't sound like something I would say.
Just a little nervous. Come, let's keep going.
Yeah, let's...
All my friends are going to the park, but I have to go to some boring party?
You think that the party's going to be boring?
That's it, Ray. So you're reflecting her feelings back. Yes, it's just a bunch of grown-ups sitting around an old house. I want to be with my friends.
But Grandma has that big bowl of coffee nips.
I don't care. And you can't make me.
What are you doing?
I'm not going.
Please get up. Please get up.
Why do I have to go?
Well, I don't know.
But why?
Because I said so. That was me when I was a kid. Mommy said you gotta go.
Mommy, out of Ray. Thank you.
Look, you better get up or
what?
Or no more TV.
No, Ray.
Okay. Or you're going to boarding school.
Do you always threaten?
No. No, sometimes she yells.
Oh, Ray. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. Thank you all for coming. I'll see you next week. Ray and Deborah, I'd like you to stay after class, please. I think we need to talk.
All right, so active listening, as you saw there,
What not to do.
there are, you see some things you don't do. I will tell you this, active listening takes a lot of energy. The first thing is, you've got to stay focused. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'll be talking with a salesman or someone, who's trying to sell me something. It's like, I'm watching their mouth move. I'm not hearing any words come out of their mouth. And I'm thinking about, the fact that I still have, 2 coats of paint to put on the banisters. And then after that, I want to make sure I tape off the windows before we spray the inside. And did I pick up anything for doing the yard work next week? And so completely ignoring it. But I'll be so good at it, it's like every once in a while throwing out, or nod your head, a little bit, but completely not paying attention, not staying focused on what I should be doing. The other thing too is when you're staying focused is don't hear part of the conversation and judge just on the parts that you're actually catching, okay? That can be really dicey. That can be really bad. So don't get judgy about, what you do here if you're not staying focused. The next thing is really listen. And this is the part that's really hard for me. Don't think about a similar experience or how I'm going to respond to this person, what I'm going to say next. I'm just waiting for that half a second of him taking a breath to jump in there and say something, Just let people talk, okay? And that goes along with the next one. Allow for periods of silence. It can be really
Amen.
How many people felt uncomfortable with the silence? It's, mostly, if we would be more honest with ourselves, oftentimes in conversations, we are very uncomfortable with silence. And that's a valid point, Tasha, absolutely.
They're thinking about you, they're
Yeah.
thinking about themselves.
That's what my father used to say. I said, Dad, what will they think about you? He goes, they don't think about you, they think about themselves. And so, it's really important to wait for the other person to complete their thoughts. And this is also extremely difficult for me. I just want to solve their problem, save the world, and move on to my next project. Paraphrasing. This is important because and you don't want to become mechanical, and we're going to show you why you don't become mechanical when we on this last video. You don't want to like have a list because you're talking to someone and oh I got that one. I'm doing this one right now. I'm waiting for silence. And so yeah, don't read off a script, as you're listening to people. But to paraphrase, it means basically from time to time you repeat what the other person says. To assure them that, first of all, you're actually listening to them and you're hearing what they're saying. So that way, there isn't a misunderstanding. And then, I think Chuck had blurted out earlier, it's emotionally draining. And it is emotionally draining. Because our conversations, as I said before, are only about 60% hearing. The other part is the emotional part. Those visual cues, even body language, how a person sits, if they're comfortable. If you're talking to someone and they're sitting like this, you kind of know, man, it's going to be tough sledding, right? Because they're just not open. They're kind of uptight. And so the emotions, understanding the emotions behind the words, and even paraphrasing those emotions back to that person will help them. And so this is just a very small, quick little thing. There's a bunch of good little websites that will talk about active listening. Here's the big thing. You got to do it. You got to shaman this. You got to hear and you got to actually do what it takes, because listening is one of those things is you do or you don't. It's like swimming. You're either going to swim or you're going to drown. And so it's the same way with listening. And so, and I know these are things that I've got to work on these things. Because it's in communication, listening is critical. In leadership, listening is critical. And so I know all of you are really, really, really concerned about Raymond right now, wondering how that all worked out for him, right? So we want to check on Raymond.
Why did you do this, Allie? This is terrible.
Oh, great!
This is Michael's giraffe. He's crying now. Why did you do this?
Cause.
Cause is not an answer.
Active listening.
Ray, that doesn't work.
It works. I just use all the worst kids in the neighborhood.
Would you? Look at this. Look what she did.
Try it.
No, Ray.
Want me to do it?
No. Okay. Allie, let's talk about what you did.
I don't want to talk.
Are you feeling angry?
Reflect back.
You're angry.
Yes.
Okay. Then it's not okay to rip up toys when we're angry.
I'm judgmental.
You are angry because...
Because it used to be your toy.
Yes.
I see. You think that Mommy and Daddy pay too much attention to Michael and Jeffrey.
Right, okay, I was handling this.
They did everything.
Right, and You're upset because we gave him your old giraffe.
I still liked it.
But you weren't playing with it.
But that doesn't matter though, because it was still yours. And you're mad because we gave it to Michael without asking you, right?
Right.
Well, Mommy and Daddy made a mistake. And everybody makes mistakes, right, Mommy?
Yes, yes, yes.
Do you feel better now, Allie?
Yes, can I have the giraffe?
Well, it's broken, honey.
I know, I want to try to fix it for Michael.
This-
Thank you, Daddy.
See what I did there?
Yeah, yeah. Can't believe it. It's pretty amazing. You did it.
Anything else need taken care of while I'm around there?
No.
What? What's the matter?
Nothing with you, obviously.
Don't go by me. I'm a natural. Forget it.
Oh, look. Act so proud of yourself. Give me the active listening crap. Where do you get off listening to me?
Never happen again.
All right, so that may not be the way we want to have that work out. Here's the thing. It comes down to caring for people. And as a leader and as a discipler, your role is that of an under shepherd. And in the same way that Jesus took care of his men, is the same way as a shepherd takes care of his sheep. You know, that was their life. That was Jesus' life. It should be our life. That we're taking care of the ones that we've been entrusted with. And so it's about people. It's about caring for people. It's about valuing who they are and what they say. And so I don't want anyone else, I for one have learned a valuable lesson today. And so I think that this whole thing was just really for me. I'm glad you guys showed up though. So.